I'm probably the most unhandy person in the world. I mean, screwing a light bulb in is a challenge for me. And I think they're all looking at me like, you must be crazy. You're walking away from a prestigious title at a prestigious company to do bathroom remodeling. From end of April to end of 24, we did $1.9 million in revenue. In 2025, we did $4.3 million in revenue. And this year, we've done already about $2.3 million in revenue from January 1st to April 28th.
Welcome to the Franchise Champion Show. I'm Alan Regala, former G1 athlete, Stanford engineer, and franchise owner who built a multi-million-dollar exit. I created this show to help driven individuals like you find the right franchise and learn how to build wealth and reclaim your time. My guest today walked away from a high-powered corporate career to bet on himself. And in less than 2 years with 5-Star Bath Solutions of Orange County, he's built something that most seasoned business owners would envy. Mike Sarfity, welcome to the Franchise Champion Show.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
It's great to have you here. I'm excited to learn more about your history and your business. Take us back to before franchising. What were you doing before and how did you get into the business?
Yeah, interesting you ask. So I was in corporate America. I was at a Big Four consulting firm doing mergers and acquisitions, doing the standard 60, 70, 80-hour week.
I don't know how you did that. I don't know how you did that.
It was, it was brutal, but it was kind of what was par for the course. I was the lovable partner, and if you wanted to make partner, you really had to, put in the hours and, satisfy the client needs and also grow business. And I want to say it was I think it was my daughter's 7th birthday. It was a weekend, and I had all these deliverables due on a Sunday morning, which was kind of ridiculous to begin with. And I remember just working. It was 1 a.m. after the party ended, and my father-in-law came on and goes, what are you doing? And I kind of had this moment. I was like, what am I doing? And I realized I didn't know about franchising at the time, but I just realized I needed a little more control on my professional destiny. I think I was going to be dead by the time, I made partner. And I just wanted to do something else. I felt like I was starting to miss a good amount of time with my family for work, whether it was traveling or just these, crazy deadlines. So I continued working, obviously, at my current job, but I started looking into business and, really kind of my thought was, I'm looking for, a boring business, something that, I don't need to be, a top 5, educational, whiz to master, but something that it's a need. And, especially something nowadays, everyone's into AI and, cutting edge technology, but there's still a lot of, I would say more basic needs that people have.
For sure.
So I went down the path. I was looking, different websites. I looked at a couple coin operated laundromats. I looked at a food truck. I looked at a lot of things. And then I met someone.
Were these existing businesses that you were looking at?
Existing at the time, yeah. I didn't even think about starting my own business yet. And then I met someone that was a franchise consultant, and it wasn't business development for a specific franchise, just a consultant to see if franchising is something that would be interesting. And at first, I didn't really know, but we spent a couple hours, over a month kind of chatting, and he came back with a couple different options, 5-Star Bath Solutions being one of them. We kind of honed in on in-home services, things that didn't have a massive startup cost, and things that I think had a level of maturity where, I wasn't going to create something from scratch. That was part of it too. If I was going to do this and take this risk, I wanted to have something that had a model that was proven that I think I can implement. And, it was 5-Star Bath Solutions. It was a roofing company, a pipe cleaning company, and an alternative to epoxy floor company. And I met with all the different, leadership groups, and I really just resonated with the 5-Star Bath Solutions team.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it about them that you liked?
I like that they seem very put together. One is, they were in business doing this for about 8 or 9 years before I came here. So it wasn't, one of the other companies was there for, I think, 6 months, and you could just see, what they were talking about, almost like, well, if you do this, you be the guinea pig, right? Especially in California, where a lot of rules differ, versus many other states. 5-Star Bath Solutions understood, I wasn't the first person in California. I certainly wasn't the first person in their franchise. We had a really good unit economics. This is the expectation. One of the companies was saying, oh, you should expect a 40% profit margin. And in my head, in-home services is not a 40% profit margin. Most businesses, this seemed more realistic. And, when I was comparing, if I was going to do something in my house, if I had to do a roof, yeah, I have to do a roof. But, would I do an alternative to epoxy floor in my garage, or would I want to redo my bathroom? And, and I kind of thought, the bathroom had a much more of a, appeal. There's obviously a big need for people with a bathroom, but I also think there's a want to it. And just, I would say, the leadership team, you had Dean Hartley, who's the president, still is. I can call him almost any time of the day still, and he'll pick up the phone and he'll spend an hour with me. He doesn't care. But it's not just me. He does it for anybody. He's really, he really believes in what he's selling and, what he's behind. But, there's business coaches, there's a sales coach, there's marketing coaches, there's production coaches, there's a coach for a lot of my managers on the team too. And, that was kind of explained to me when I joined, you're taking a step, in the world without a safety net because you're running your own business, but there is a lot of resources available to you here, and that's not everywhere. And everything they've said, it's really been pretty true. I can't think of some fabricated, line that they fed me, when I was going through confirmation that really was just, a sales pitch. They've stuck with pretty much everything they've said.
Wow. That's great to hear. That's really great to hear, because definitely not everybody can say that. Yeah, that's awesome. And that's really interesting too. Having coaches available for your leadership team. That's pretty unusual, I would say.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I did this franchise and I was telling some of my friends, I'm probably the most unhandy person in the world. Screwing a light bulb in is a challenge for me. And I think they're all looking at me like, you must be crazy. You're walking away from, a good living, a good earning, a prestigious title at a prestigious company to do bathroom remodeling. And, and they joke every time I have a home project here, I need to bring a friend over just because I don't have the skill set to do it. But it's not about installing, it's about running a business. And, they helped me find, good sales reps. I had to hire them, but, they vetted them with me and they thought these are things that were strengths about certain people and not. And obviously I don't use them to that degree anymore because I now have a team and we do that internally. When I was looking for my first installer, the production coach, met with them and he told me, he goes, I think the first guy is overselling, what he can do. And he felt the second guy was, humble about what he can do and felt that he would, and, I would have had no clue. I'm just reading a piece of paper, as a resume and, someone's selling themselves to me. Hiring is a crapshoot in general, but it was especially for a function that I don't understand the intricacies to. So they were great. I still meet with the owners once a week. We discuss whatever it may be, whether it's seasonal, macro, micro economic conditions, things that we're trying to implement. I meet with my coach once a month. My team meets with, their coaches, not as often, but, once a month, once a quarter, whatever it is. If we need to, if we've had a little bit of a dip and we want to reset, sometimes we'll kind of all get together in a meeting with corporate and walk through our problems. Not that we can't solve them here, but it's good to have an objective voice, because sometimes I think we start defending ourselves of why things are the way they are. And when you talk to someone that's not part of it, they can look at numbers a little bit differently than maybe we are looking at them, or trying to, massage them in our head. And they give us some objective feedback or things that they've seen elsewhere that have worked that maybe we're not thinking of. So I love the fresh perspective that they offer.
Yeah, that's huge. I think having both the community of other owners that you can connect with to get perspectives from the same business in other areas of the country, outside of your own, as well as, perspective, obviously, from your coach, franchise that works at the franchisor, who seeing things from a different perspective, but also just seeing, talking to other franchise owners, of course, as well, across the country. There's just a lot of support there, which is awesome. That's one thing I really love about franchising is all of the knowledge and the sharing, the peer support that you get from the community and the franchisor as well.
Yeah. And it's not, look, we're all obviously probably secretly competitive with ourselves, but, no one's hiding trade secrets. When the brand does better nationally, it means it does better locally. So, everyone is, rooting for each other, in their own way. And I think that really resonates. And and shows itself when we talk, with others. No one's, hiding something in their back pocket. Everyone's pretty vocal about things that are working or things that are not working.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you mentioned one thing that was very interesting here that I want to circle back to, which is you had no skill set background in home improvement, remodeling.
I mean, I can talk about it. If you had me install your bathroom, you would not be happy.
So this is, I think, one of the really cool things about franchising that just makes it accessible to a lot more people, which is not having specific experience in that area, yet being able to start a business, essentially, in that space. So what was that like for you, just knowing that you didn't have the background, but choosing anyways to go into this field? Was that scary, or did you feel pretty confident because, it was a franchise? What was that like?
Definitely scary. I kind of, it's like jumping off the high dive for the first time. You kind of get your foot to the edge and you're like, am I going to really do this? Am I that silly? And then, if you just rip the Band-Aid off quick and go, it's going to be okay. I had just gotten to the point where, working at my other career just wasn't worth it to me anymore. So I just kind of kept telling myself, look, what's the worst case that happens? This fails. It's a complete and utter embarrassment, and I go find something else to do, which I believed I could. So I kind of kept that in my back head. It's like, the rock bottom isn't as rock bottom as you're making it out to be. And that was kind of the courage I think I needed internally to jump off the cliff. But when we started, I had a huge checklist of things I had to do, with the state, with vendors, with systems that they provide me, systems like QuickBooks that I need for myself. And as you're going through it each week, you're starting to feel better and better about kind of getting set up. And then right before we launched, I went out to Michigan with the corporate team, and we spent, it had to be 50 hours that week just going through everything again. And not that you didn't know it, but now you're going through it at, just a greater level of detail. And that really made me feel good while we were out there, to know that we can do it. And, as we started doing it, we kind of hit the ground running. I know some people have had that similar success. Other people have, struggled out of the gate. It's even someone I've sold, services in the M&A space. Those sales cycles are months, or even longer, depending on, activity going on in the marketplace. This type of sale here is, 90 to 120 minutes. So as much as I know about sales, I didn't really know much about this type of selling. It's very different. But once we kind of got the ball rolling, it's like the basketball player that hits a few layups and all of a sudden can start shooting 3-pointers. The confidence built, and those first, 7-8 weeks were great. And then we started doing installs, right? So we sell, and we, in the beginning, especially, we stayed 8 weeks out. This way we can make sure that our installation team was ready, our, production group was, dialed in, and then we get to the first project that was good. And then we started ramping up more, and, we quickly realized that, I don't have the skill set to directly manage the installers, because when they had questions for me, I did not have an answer for them. How do we align the peach? I don't know. We're talking to the wrong guy. So probably the biggest thing that we did is we got a production manager, and probably earlier than most would have, but I just knew it was a skill set I didn't have. And I hired someone that had his own construction company for, 20 years. I think he liked the construction aspect. I think he did not like the selling aspect. And I told him, I said, you don't have to worry about anything about selling. You have to worry about communicating with the production team and communicating with the customer, right? Taking whatever challenge we may have and, boiling it down to something simple that someone that's 70 years old can understand and acknowledge. So once we got that piece in, I definitely felt much more comfortable about, we're spending money for the company. We're taking deposits, and, now I felt really good that we're returning a product that we can, be proud of. So that was kind of like, I would say the really big scary moment, right when we, probably 2 months in when we started. We have ups and downs on the sales side, and, no job is always perfect. We do have callbacks on certain things, but it's all manageable now. And, kind of as we've grown, we know what to expect. We rarely see a surprise that we've never seen anymore. So that's also kind of calmed the nerves as we've gone on.
That's great. Yeah, I remember, the first few months, the first 6 months or whatever, in my business, you come from training and it's like you're drinking from a fire hose. And so, there's only so much you can absorb and actually, learn during that time frame. But then in the practice and actually trying and selling, getting out there in the field and doing is where the learning really becomes ingrained, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. Make a few mistakes and you learn not to make those again the next time.
Exactly. I think one thing that's cool that you mentioned, you realize that, those installers, once you started getting some jobs getting installed, that, okay, maybe you need some support because you can't answer certain questions, technical questions. And so bringing on this this manager or lead, for the installers helps obviously answer their questions and provided leadership for them. But I think at the same time, it's also kind of setting the path for you to scale the business because, you have kind of that portion of the business offloaded already, even if it was a little earlier than maybe you were anticipating, or maybe than some other franchisees would have hired such a person. But it's kind of cool that you kind of preempted growth by having that ability versus maybe someone who would have come in with the technical background, maybe wouldn't hire as early and might wait too long because maybe they know so much, but then they're so ingrained in the business that it's hard for them to step back.
And it's funny that what you just said is a challenge that I deal with every day, right? I mean, when we started, I helped with the calling, I didn't really do much sales. I did some of the elements of material ordering, material staging in our warehouse. And I was really close to, working with the installers back then, building the pay sheets, making sure we had, the loads of incidental materials that you probably don't think of that you need from a plumbing perspective. And once I brought him in, we kind of had our own processes that we've built within the process. So I think there's a nice framework that 5-Star lays out. But we kind of built some of our own processes that made life easier for him as a production manager and for me as an owner. But yeah, I mean, he was worth his weight in gold. Honestly, I mean, there was a level of stress that came off. There was a lot of, responsibilities that, at that time I've offloaded. And I look at it now, I mean, I just ran payroll earlier this week, but I mean, I don't order materials anymore. I don't do any of the project management anymore. I don't do any of the, obviously, installation or production standpoint scheduling. I have 4 people that make calls out to leads to set up appointments. So I'm not involved there anymore. We have, it ranges anywhere from, 4 to 7 sales reps, depending on kind of where we are. They're doing all the sales calls. I mean, I'm able to manage. And, as we started a show and events group now, so we're doing, different events, I've been able to focus there. And as that manager is kind of, grown into the role, I'll eventually start stepping back there. And, we'll find the next thing, as your point, to scale and grow that I can get involved in or look at strategically. And, is it something that, can be run by the team that exists? Do we need a new department? But yeah, it's been really exciting. But I'm happy that I'm out of a lot of the day-to-day.
That's awesome. In some ways, not having the background in this particular industry, it was a little bit of an advantage in that you hired earlier, and so you kind of it seems like you kept yourself a little bit more high level versus in the weeds too much, for too long, which is nice.
And I'm sure you've seen it at other franchises, right? They'll talk about the owner, the executive model, the owner operator, or the absentee. And I don't think I'll ever want to be truly absentee. There is a level of, sweat equity I have in this, but I didn't want to come here and do the work, right? I wanted to come here and own a business and
own a business.
and that was kind of some of the, the guiding principles that I kept in mind as we were going. I know some people that start out do their own sales, and that's great, and I think that's awesome. It just wasn't something that I wanted to. I wanted to know enough where I could challenge any specific area, even though I don't know installation. I at this point I know enough about it theoretically where I can challenge maybe the timing or why we would want to do something like A versus B. But I'm kind of happy being a step or two removed, and I think I'm sure the guys are too. I'm sure the last thing they want is me watching over them, and I didn't want that for them either. I want it to be at a place that they want to come work at and not feel that I'm scrutinizing everything that they do.
Right. That's great. Yeah. I mean, for you to be able to focus on bigger picture things and the team itself, managing the team and the people and all those sorts of things. That's and marketing, of course, looking at marketing and lead generation, all the higher level things that really drive growth. I mean, that's what you're focusing on, which is awesome.
Right.
Quick pause. If you're grinding 70-hour weeks and watching someone else build equity, that's exactly the problem I help people solve. I work with driven professionals to find the right franchise opportunity, and I do it at no cost to you. Head to athlete2owner.com/ready. All right, back to Mike. Okay, so let's take a step back and tell us exactly, people might be able to guess by our conversation here, but what does 5-Star, Bath Solutions do?
So 5-Star Bath Solutions is a bathroom remodeling franchise focused mostly on the wet area. So when we say a wet area of a bathroom, really talking about the shower, bathtub space. If you've done any home improvement project, there are companies that are, niche players like we are in the wet area. And then there's general contractors that, are, what I would say jack of all trades. We're more of a master of one. We've started to do some of the dry area. You kind of get some customers that struggle that they would need more than one person in a 5x8 space to do work. So we've adapted a little bit to do some of those more popular elements of maybe putting in new vanity or flooring in the bathroom, but we really stick to remodeling showers. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is a typical installation of doing a tub to a shower or a shower or a tub to a tub. We can usually do them in let's call it 2 to 3 days, which is significantly faster than your average general contractor. They'll take a week or two or even more depending on their schedule and what else is going on. I think of us almost like a Ford T model, right? I mean, the installers are only doing installs. There's nothing else that they're focused on, and we're able to execute that, with a high level of proficiency and efficiency. That's great. So it's very niche, just basically the wet area, like you mentioned, which is most like shower/tub, and fixing that up versus kind of gutting an entire. Exactly. I mean, we've done those big projects, but I would say 85% of what we do is just a wet area remodel. Yeah. It's really interesting. The franchise that I had, Shelf Genie, is also very niche, and it was an interesting model because it's very similar where, we worked on existing cabinets and we retrofit them with shelves that pull out, right? Which, a lot of people like, oh, well, cabinet makers make that products like that, any like general contractors could do that. Handyman can do that. There's a lot of other, options, I guess, but the business was very successful, for me, because we focused on this one very specific thing and we were able to execute on it very, very, very well, which sounds a lot like, what you guys do. I mean, I think the pitch that we make is, if you want something done right, I mean, wouldn't you want to bring in someone that's all that they do? If you were going to have heart surgery, you wouldn't bring a general surgeon in, you'd bring a heart surgeon in. And obviously we don't use those types of analogies, but I mean, that's what I think of all the time is to say, you're bringing someone that's all we do. We do nothing else. If you're asking for us to, repave your driveway, we're not the people. But what we do, we do very well. And, I think that builds a lot of confidence with people, especially, if you were in in-home services, there's a stigma to it. Everyone knows someone that's gotten, probably taken advantage of by a contractor at one point or another, rightfully or wrongfully so, whether they believe it was true or not. But, it is a little bit of an uphill battle that I think we try to, climb every day of saying, we're a company that stands behind what we do. And again, we're focusing just on this. We're not someone that's a do-it-all. We're someone that, does this and does it right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. I love it. So what's the biggest surprise for you in, I guess, maybe in expectations from where you were before in the corporate world to now having done this for how many years has it been now? So we're just starting our 3rd year. So just finished 2 years. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. What's been the biggest surprise for you in this transition?
Biggest surprise, I would say managing people. And the funny thing is, I used to manage a lot of people at my old job. This is just a different type of management of people. In the corporate world, it was mostly white collar people you manage. Here, it's a mix of white and blue collar. There's a bit of a difference in kind of expectations. Again, when I used to work at Big Four and I would send an assignment out to someone, they would do the assignment, and then they'd have 30 assumptions that they took and how and the reasoning they had to get to this conclusion or this analysis. That doesn't happen here. A lot of times if we're saying, well, let's do this, people will do exactly what you asked for, nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes, in the beginning I was thinking, man, like, how come we didn't think about this or that? And then I realized, well, that's just not this world. You've asked them to do something and they did it to the best of their ability, but they may not be thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead. And, quite honestly, what I've learned is, well, that's really not what they're paid to do. That's kind of my job, to think 3, 4 steps ahead and give them that information. So there was a bit of a shift there. That was one. And the other biggest surprise, I've worked with a lot of people, but most of our customers are 65 and over. And great people, just from a different era, different mindset, versus, when you're working with the Fortune 500, they expect things done differently, expectations are a little bit different. So some of those things, were a bit of a surprise as I came here. Like sometimes you'd have a customer that, we'd finish the project and, they asked for, hey, we want another grab bar. Not a problem. Well, we're not going to pay for the bathroom until we get the grab bar. I'm like thinking to myself, wait a second. We've built this whole shower for you. You've asked for a grab bar after the fact, but, you're holding out. And that's just the way, again, I go back to people that I think have a stigmatism about in-home services that, well, once I pay you, I'm never going to see you again. Well, no, that's not true. You will. I mean, we've been here, we plan on staying here, but they don't know that. And dealing with that was a bit of a surprise, but I think we've gotten used to kind of how that plays out sometimes, and we're more prepared for it.
Yeah, definitely. The bar for level of service in the home improvement industry is very low. I think there's a lot of people that have had bad experiences with contractors not doing a great job, and skipping town, after they're getting some amount of money and all that sort of stuff. I had the same experience, both as a business owner and as a customer as well. It is not great. So yeah, that is definitely a challenge. It can be a challenge, just proving your, legitimacy and trustworthiness for sure.
I mean, and it's something that's kind of, but in the same token, I kind of enjoy it, right? I mean, we're not the Apple of, our company does not have the same brand recognition as Apple or McDonald's or Nike. And that's okay. I mean, a lot of what we pitch is we are, a company that's woven into the, local community. And, we're not this, massive monster that, you become just a number. Everybody, when you're a customer here, everyone knows who you are, from the installers to the sales reps, to management, to the call team. So, you're part of the, you're part of the team. I hate to use the term family, but you're part of the group. I mean, you're more than just, number 101. And I do like that. And, we wake up every day motivated, trying to, continue to build on that. And, there is something rewarding about that journey versus, just being, the biggest fish in the sea on day one. So I've enjoyed that ride of having to kind of prove your self-worth to others, every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic. Mike, tell me if you're comfortable with this, do you mind sharing your financial performance over, that first year and, and second year, how you've done? I mean, it's pretty incredible. And if you're willing to share that, I think that would be amazing for others to hear.
So we launched right at the end of April in 2024. And so from end of April to end of 24, we did $1.9 million in revenue.
Wow.
Yep. In 2025 calendar year, we did 4.3 million in revenue. And this year we've done already about 2.3 million in revenue, so far from January 1st to, it's called April 28th. So we've really been fortunate to have a great team here that, kind of believes in what we do. And, the numbers have really been, have been great for us. And I think everyone's, everyone gets excited about it. We're pretty transparent. We share that information with almost every employee in the company. We want them to see the growth. We want them to understand that, we're, for people that more management, we've come in and we've taken market share away from others, and then for, people that are installing or calling, we're making an impact in a lot of people's lives. I mean, last year alone, we installed bathrooms for 242 customers, which is a lot of bathrooms. And,
that's a lot of bathrooms.
Some people, wanted to refresh their home, but there are other people that could not step over the tub. And, bathing was a huge challenge for people. And we were able to solve that problem. And there's a level of reward there that felt good. So, the numbers are great. We're happy with the numbers. We've built we're still building a healthy business. We still want to grow, but, we are always grateful that we're able to, help people with, problems that, many of us may not have yet today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations, first of all. I mean, that is tremendous. Those posting those kinds of numbers in your first, just the first year or first, 9 months in business is really incredible. And the trajectory you're on right now, I mean, that's amazing. So well done. And then you combine that with what you just said now, which was, what you're really doing for people. I asked you before, what do you do at 5-Star, Bath Solutions? And really, what you're doing, at least for a majority of your customers, it sounds like, that are 65 plus, is, you're allowing them to live in their homes longer. You're allowing them to age in place. I mean, that's an amazing service that you're providing to people, something your entire team can feel really good about. Absolutely.
And sometimes when you're in the day-to-day, you forget about it. You're dealing with the customer that, may be difficult, or, sometimes one of the things we're always watching is making sure we have a team to support our growth. So as the one thing, when you grow quickly, you got to make sure you have the right number of people here to do it. So sometimes some of those, core principles, in the day-to-day get forgotten. Just not too long ago, we did a project for an organization that supports, abused women, and they had a bathroom that was, that needed to be repaired. And, we did it. And actually, myself and, one of our managers, we went out separately on a different day. We went to their headquarters, just learn more about their organization, and, just super inspired. I mean, we saw just the passion that they had for helping others. And, it was a good reminder to me. And I think a lot of the team, because we shared the experience of, it's more than just a business. When we started out, it was a business. That's kind of all that was in my head. As I've seen the success stories that we've had and how we've helped people, I've realized that there's much more that goes into it than the dollars and the cents. And, that kind of gives us a good purpose of why we do the things we do.
Yeah. Yeah. That is something I learned from Lisa McLeod, who came and visited us at one of our conferences, Selling with Noble Purpose. That's one of the core principles is, having that purpose at the forefront and really building around that, your entire team. So it's something that you guys are all, working towards, and how big of a deal that comes into play with both, even on the selling front, having that mindset of, hey, we're doing this for a bigger reason, not just to, for business, but to help. We're here to serve. Yeah. It helps, improve performance tremendously. Well, and it, increases team morale and just gives people a reason to be there.
Yeah. I mean, when people believe in what we do, they want to do more. And, that starts with me, and it's, to everybody in the organization. I think, again, this isn't, the biggest company in the world, not yet, hopefully. But, I think people waking up and happy to do the things that they do to, know that, yes, there's a paycheck in it, but there's also, some moral satisfaction that they get is, you can't get that at every single job. But I think at a job like this, not everyone sees it every day, but I think, we try to share those types of success stories that remind people of, there's more to it than just, like I said, the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, last time we spoke, you mentioned that you were a wrestler in high school.
Yes.
And also you ran a marathon last year, which is amazing. Kudos. How have these things worked its way into, helped you, I guess, in the business world?
Yeah, it's really funny. I was unable to make it. Our high school team, we won a state championship 25 years ago, and we were just inducted into our high school's Hall of Fame which was a great event. I was bummed I couldn't make it. Thank you. It was, spring break, we were gone with the kids, but, I think about that a lot. I mean, growing up as a kid, everything was fun. It was great. And, when I started wrestling, I did it really just to get in better shape. I wanted to, just better myself a little bit. And there was a lot of purpose there that I got from wrestling, and a lot of mental toughness, especially if, you have to lose weight to, make a match, outworking your opponent, just a lot of things that, and, we had a great coaching staff there that really, I think, knew how to push different people in different ways. Sometimes certain people need praise, certain people need, more of a motivating attitude. And I think they were really dialed into, the 20 of us on the team. And I felt that I really grew a lot, even back then, as just a person, right? I could do more than what I thought I could. And, you think of the military and, they push themselves obviously at a different level, but, it's about believing that you can do more, we say mind over matter. And I've taken a lot of that with me, even through, college, through corporate America. I mean, I made the pivot out of corporate America, but those skills and things that I learned as a wrestler, I think really helped my career grow in corporate America. Well, it's getting late at night, let's call it quits. Well, no, we got to finish the assignment that we're given, right? We're going to do it to the best of our ability, and we're going to make sure we get it as right as we can. And, those were a lot of the principles that were instilled with me when I wrestled. And then similarly, I've never ran that much in my life. Maybe a 4 or 5 mile was the longest I did. And I'm someone that's goal oriented. If I don't have goals, I struggle. Having a goal, having something to reach for, gives me a reason to reach for it. And, especially after like a holiday season of 24, I was like, man, I got to get back into shape a little bit. And, a couple of our friends in the community were running the Long Beach Marathon, and I kind of on a whim said I'm going to do it with them. And then I realized, like, oh, well, if I said I'm going to do it, and, I got to do it. It took a lot of commitment. I mean, there was a lot of mornings that we would go Sunday morning, 6 a.m. for the long run, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 miles. And if you're not going to have the mental toughness to do it, you're not going to do it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't run a marathon, but I wanted to run mine in under 4.5 hours. I was able to do it in 4:14, but I think a lot of it was, there's a physical aspect to it for sure, but there's a mental aspect to it, and I just think, it's kind of what's just been ingrained in me. And it's, now it's like second nature. And I try to pass that to my kids. Sometimes I think I'm passing it when they're too young, but, I try to pass the mental toughness. I'm like, no one's handing you anything in life. You got to go take it, and you got to, be stronger mentally. I mean, that's every, business is, to me, just another competitive sport, and it's the people that want it the most are going to do it.
I love it. That's fantastic. Well said. Yeah. I mean, running has always, for me, been one of those things that mentally, it just, I hate running. I mean, I should say I love running after things or away from things, but never just for running's sake.
There's a lot of thinking time that goes, I mean, fortunately we had some people that we ran as groups. So, you're talking while you're running, but I mean, I've done some of the long runs by myself, and yeah, I mean, I don't like to be in my head that long, just thinking about things that I don't need to think about.
All right. So for those out there that might be listening to this, maybe they're in the corporate world, maybe they've been laid off recently, and they are, maybe thinking about a career change, either to another corporate job, but they'd rather not. Maybe they're looking at, being the master of their own, financial destiny, like you were. What sort of suggestion, what tips would you have for such a person?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is, complacency is a real thing. So, sometimes you're doing the day in, day out. It took an event where I felt like I was really missing on family time for it to kind of, I don't want to use the term hit rock bottom, but really for it to kind of wake me up to say, hey, like, you have one life to live here. Financial success is very important, but doing the things that are going to be motivating to me are equally as important. And I would say, believe in yourself. I mean, everybody started somewhere, right? Whether you started in corporate America, whether you started at, baseball for the first time, you didn't know what you were doing, and you had somebody to guide you, whether it's, parental figures, coaches, business mentors, colleagues. There's a good community out there that I think people don't realize that they have. And, if you want to do it and, mentally kind of, I would say just, keep that positive mindset and leverage your network. I think I realized there's so many more people that have done, smaller businesses or have taken risks that I don't think I thought about until I started doing it and, talking to people. And it's certainly possible. It's kind of just, making sure that you feel, that you're not alone. Even if you may be alone, you're really not. And I think, the support of my family, they were super, encouraging when I took this step. Obviously it helped that my wife had a full-time job and, she had insurance for the family. So, again, I did have some safety nets that, that were fortunate for us. But, just the ability to keep kind of pushing yourself and believing that there's more that you can do than you can. And I think that's true for the vast majority of people when they start doing it. And they get put into a situation where, it's sink or swim. I think a lot more people swim than they would think they would. Yeah.
I love it. Well said. Great information, great advice. Thank you, Mike, for joining me today on the show and sharing your wealth of knowledge and your experiences. And congratulations on being a franchise champion.
Thank you. This was awesome. I had a great time doing this.
Awesome. Hopefully, maybe we'll check in again when you're at 10 million or whatever next year, and see how things are going.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
You got it. Thanks.
From Big Four director to running crews in Orange County. Most people would call that a step down. Mike would probably laugh at that. Ownership hits different when it's yours. The equity is yours, the upside is yours, the pride of building something from the ground up, that's yours too. If you're at that crossroads, good career, good money, but still feel like you're building someone else's dream, I get it. That's exactly who I work with. We figure out what fits your goals, your capital, your life, and find the specific franchise that makes sense for you. Not just any brand, the right one. And I do it at no cost to you. athlete2owner.com/ready, or grab the link in the show notes. I'm Alan Regala, helping you become a franchise champion. See you in the next one.